Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the October 2019 customer webinar. At today's customer webinar, Christine Masters, Director of Product Management, has recruited a panel of our own experts. We figured out that everyone today has had newsroom experience prior to coming to TownNews, so they really know what they're talking about. They're going to share easy design strategies you can use to create high-impact articles that grow and engage your audience. So joining us today is Joe Hansen, Senior Product Manager, Tim Turner, IQ Engage Program Manager, Doug Green, Product Manager, and I'm Cherry Wolf, Marketing Specialist for TownNews. The presentation will take about 30 minutes and a Q&A will follow. At any point, you can type a question into the chat box, but we'll wait to answer them at the end. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available early next week. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about developing your article design strategy, some ideas you can do for creating beautiful magazine-style pages, how to distribute your content, and keeping your audience engaged with push notifications. But before we get started, Doug has some things he'd like to share.
Yes, we've got some exciting new things here on the horizon that will be coming out here in the near term that we want to make sure that everybody is aware of. So the first thing that we'll be rolling out quickly here is going to be a flower and tree service we are going to be calling Gifts of Remembrance. This will work with our Tributes program. And basically what it is it'll give your site visitors the ability to purchase a flower or plant a tree in remembrance of a deceased loved one. It is going to be a revenue share program. The way that it works is we will match the obit that is on your site with our vendors database. If there is a match to be made, if they find that person, you will have the ability to purchase flowers for a particular service. If that person cannot be found, you can still plant a tree in memoriam for them. It's a good program because it's very hands-off for your newsroom. You're going to upload you're going to create your obits just like you always do. And pretty much all the matching will be handled on the back side. All the customer service is handled by our vendors. So it is basically turn this on your site and make money. So it's very, very nice for your site there. Also, we will be offering, we'll be looking at the basketball season. Is right around the corner. So we are also offering games performed for basketball this year. So a usual turnkey operation, if you've used Games Perform before, basically exact same process as football season or bracket season that we had last year with a lot of success. Basically just to make you guys aware that it is coming up. Prep basketball season does start in 6 weeks, NCAA starts in 5, the NBA season starts in 3, and our sales team is looking to have those contracts back in the next 2 weeks. So a little bit of a push there. But you do have those options if that is something that you are looking to place on your site, whether if you have used it previously or it's another revenue opportunity that you would like to explore here in the future, that is available to you as well. You can always contact your sales rep for either of those programs.
Awesome, thank you, Doug. So this is Christine, and so just to get started on today's presentation, like Terry said, we have several people here that we've pulled in who have former journalism and media experience, and so we're going to kind of break this up a little bit and talk about several different pieces of article strategy and article design. So I hope that this will be valuable to you and your staff. To get started, we wanted Tim to talk a little bit about article strategy and measurements of success.
Yeah, sure. So over the last several years, as more and more publications have pivoted to consumer revenue or subscriber revenue strategies, there's been a greater emphasis on the role that the newsroom plays in contributing to media organizations' bottom line. And so what a lot of newsrooms have been doing is really taking a deep look at their content and understanding how their content contributes to conversions, whether that's subscription conversions, email signups, or even just their general programmatic revenue strategy. So some of the traditional metrics that newsrooms use, like page views or engagement time, now we're looking more at things like customer lifetime value and RFV scores, which is like how recent a user came to a site, how frequently they come, and how many page views they consume when they come to a site. So the metrics are getting more and more sophisticated, but I think at the core, the goal is to really focus on, newsrooms have the greatest impact to media organizations' ability to generate revenue, and that we need to start paying more attention to what the data is telling us about what our audience is interested in and what content is performing well on the domain. When Gannett did a deep dive into the data in their newsroom, they found that about 20% of their articles were generating about 80% of their traffic. And so for them, that was really kind of a reflection on, okay, not that we can trim the newsroom and just focus on these topics, but that we need to really evaluate how much time we're spending on content that our users really aren't interested in. So we definitely encourage newsrooms, depending on no matter what level you're at, that you really start examining the data that's available to you to develop strategies for your content. So if you're a newsroom or an organization that doesn't really hasn't set a clear goal on we're driving programmatic revenue, or we're really focused on subscriber conversions, a great place to start for your newsroom would simply be, okay, well, let's focus on page views and engagement time on content and make sure that we understand kind of what our audience is interested in. If you're an organization that has a better understanding of what your overall business goals are for your digital property, then it's really good to tie those newsroom goals to your broader business strategies. And so really focus on what metrics the newsroom should focus on to help drive revenue success. So if you're more of a programmatic advertising strategy, that's more what we call reach. And so you're really focused on getting as many users in and as many page views. However, if you're really focused on consumer revenue, you're really focusing on how engaged that user is, how often they're coming back. And so you're really focused on a subset of your audience, not necessarily just driving as many page views as possible. So how this kind of ties into articles, if we look at the next slide, obviously, the majority of the page views on any website are going to come from articles. It tends to be kind of the end game for users. We're trying to get them to the content to read that and be engaged. Overall, network-wide for TownNews, it's about 56%. A lot of that's because we've seen, a lot of customers using different content strategies, whether that's video or collections or other things, to generate a lot of page views or engagement. But articles still are really kind of the primary thing that you are offering up to your users in exchange for their time. So it's really important to pay attention to what your articles look like, what the experience is like for users on those articles. And so,
I was going to say really quickly, and one thing to add at that part too is that, a lot of times we'll hear from the digital director who's spending, 3 hours per night fixing up the homepage and moving around every detailed tiny article on the homepage. And that's one of the things that this data is telling us as well, is that people are coming in from social media, coming in from elsewhere, and not necessarily spending that amount of time on the homepage that you think they are.
Yeah, and I think that's looked at a little bit deeper in the next slide, where we kind of look at how different acquisition channels and how those users are interacting with your website. The green is a carryover from the last slide. You can see that for each graph, the green are article page views, and we really see that subscribers tend to, they're coming in through organic acquisition channels. They're really focused on your index pages and section fronts, and they really use those to kind of decide what content to read. Whereas users from social media or other platforms tend to come in directly to an article because that's what they're presented with, right? They're presented with a link to an article, and that's how they come in. And unfortunately, organic and things like that tend to be, much smaller compared to the broader, all the other acquisition channels. So really, we always say kind of the majority of your users are going to enter on an article page. And so you should really consider that when you're looking at how are engaging users and what their experience is. So you're spending all this time designing your home pages or these section fronts, but really a user is going to come in on an article. What are you doing on that page to kind of bring them into your site and to really engage them and convert them, or do a lot of the other strategies that your company might have, or that we'll talk in greater detail in this presentation.
Yeah, awesome. And that's exactly what we're kind of talking about here on the next couple of slides. What are the key factors in creating good articles on the site? What are users actually looking for when they're looking at an article? And you can obviously just apply this to yourself. And when you go to a website looking for something, what is it that you want? You obviously want to get the information as quick as possible. A lot of times you're trying to look through an article to answer a specific question. And so you want to just kind of scan through it and then see when the event starts, or when the, who was arrested or whatever. And, or one of the other kind of use cases for people kind of looking through articles is that they're having fun. They're browsing the site, they're reading stuff. So they really want to have a storytelling experience. They want to be compelled to be drawn deeper into the site. So those are all kind of different experiences that you can help cultivate within your site itself. It's also really important that there's kind of a feeling of trust, that they understand that this is a real media site, and it's they might not necessarily, especially if they came in from social, they might not even be familiar with your site in particular, but you want to kind of create a professional looking site that they feel they can trust as they read the content. So that's something to kind of think about as you're building these stories on the site. And then the most important thing that we'd like to try to address in this webinar is just how can you keep them engaged, and what are some strategies for doing article design to help keep them engaged throughout the article. I will say I actually stole some of the information on this slide from the Wisconsin State Journal, who did kind of an article engagement internal presentation and goals for their organization. So thank you to Wisconsin State Journal for allowing me to steal this. But I thought this was just a really good way to kind of state one of the key points that we're talking about here in this webinar, which is you should be trying to, again, draw users into the site, and each individual page should not be a dead end where they're left on that particular page. You should try to always have related content, additional links, and things like that. Like off to the side here, we see that there's kind of a card that has been pulled in line into this story. So as they're looking through the mobile version of this story, you might understand that you're going to start losing people halfway through the article, so you can give them a way to get re-engaged in their experience and not lose interest in that article. You're going to re-engage them by allowing them to go to another article. So again, this is kind of like not having a dead end on the site where it's just an article and then they have nowhere else to go other than closing the browser or going to another site. So a couple of the strategies there are just making sure that, they talk about a byline story here, so kind of your locally written articles, make sure that they all have related children and siblings. It might be an older article, it might be evergreen content that you already have on the site. One of the things that they talked about in their presentation was, each reporter or news producer should understand historical evergreen content related to what they're working on right now. So if they're writing an article about a business that is closing, you should have a collection of all of the businesses in the area that have closed over the last couple of years or something like that. And then you find that evergreen content with that collection of closed businesses in the area, and then add that onto your article as you're working on it. So that's a really great idea. Additionally, some other concepts are putting hyperlinks inside the article itself, whether that's to another article inside the site or to a section front, anything like that. And you can actually just highlight the text in the story and then create a hyperlink to that other story. Obviously, those types of inline links are also very compelling, and they add additional depth to the reporting. So those are some really important strategies that you can use. I will also mention that behavioral content recommendations are an awesome way to, again, give them additional content to go to once they finish with this article. Behavioral content recommendations work with contextual on the site itself. So if we don't know anything about that particular user, it'll show more articles similar to this one. So winter weather, and it will show additional stories about weather stories. But if we know specific things that this user has looked at in the past, we will present more content about those specific things they're interested in. So we have some really great ways of keeping them engaged in the site and essentially turning that one page view into 2, into 3, into 4. So now we're going to talk about some key elements that you can utilize while creating actual articles and try to keep people engaged and keep people looking throughout the site and keep them scrolling down, basically. Obviously a large percentage of pretty much any of your sites will be mobile. And on mobile, really what your goal is to just keep them scrolling, right? You want to always have at least every 2 screens, maybe even more, you want to have some kind of compelling visual element that keeps them scrolling down. In blocks, there is a lot you can do with adding in inline content so that you can have those very strategically placed photo galleries, strategically placed photos or slideshows, additional things like that. If you're not familiar with how we do inline content, please make sure to either look at our help site or ask a customer support representative. It's really a great feature within blocks, and we've had a lot of people have really good success with that. You can search for what's called the article designer, which allows you to create a lot of really great inline content to keep them scrolling down. We actually have something called inline presentation modes, which means that if you take a photo and you put it in line inside of, let's say, after the 4th paragraph of an article, we actually have different presentation modes that allow you to have kind of a cool effect on that photo as the user is scrolling down. So we do mosaics on slideshows, we do a parallax effect on images, we can do cover art to make like a magazine style presentation. So there's a bunch of different types of techniques that you can do on articles to help make them a more compelling experience. In the same tone, we have, those same tools also, of course, work on the desktop side. They, of course, look different. They're more tailored to the desktop experience, but you can see here in these couple of examples, we have an article in the back that has kind of a showcase hero image that's really big in the back. Then we have a long form article that is very tailored to a reading experience. And then you can see here that this is just a test article that I did. I've added in additional photos. This one is float left, this one is kind of centered, and they stick out from the sides of the long form article, again, for kind of visual interest. And it really helps them, again, kind of be compelled in the story and keep scrolling down. So there's some great opportunities that you have to use Article Designer to create those really great experiences. So Joe's going to talk about a couple of things with story presentation.
All right. So the story presentations are something you need to consider for different impacts you want to make with articles. The standard default is really the standard default article presentation, which has got right rail for on desktop, and all of your standard page elements. Your related content will go to the left. You've got your basic. You can still do your article design elements to it, but it is constrained with the rest of the page. So if you wanted to make a more impactful presentation, the long form is an excellent way of doing that. But keep in mind that when you do use a long form, you are eliminating that right rail, which may have impacts on your ad positioning or ads that are available, and also other related content items like top stories or calendar, etc. that you may have prominently displayed there. So you want to make sure you don't overuse the long form, but it is an excellent way of telling those big, in-depth your kind of your Sunday package style stories, and to be able to use those and intersperse your different graphics to really pull things out, some parallax images, some inline audio files and videos and whatnot to really spice up those big Sunday package elements. And then personality is good for that kind of bloggy or opinion style article where you're going to be featuring the personality who is writing and behind it. And on that, you want to make sure as well that your reporters have made sure to fill out their staff profile box with their bio and whatnot, and they have their title and contact information as well. So that can all be kind of populated on those personality pages. You can also do some great presentation modes with collections, including things like mapping them, turning them into a timeline. So this is excellent for maybe you're following a big court case. So you have all those assets in a collection, and you can spread them out over a great timeline. So these are great ways of telling ongoing stories.
And also think too, if you probably maybe a year or so ago, we actually spent a good deal of development time going through all of our collection presentation modes. And if it's a calendar item or if it's a coupon, we actually built in special functionality so those all look good. So that's something to think about too, is it might be something to experiment with, or we can do a webinar about it in the future. So try that out, because we did spend a lot of time making those look good, and you have a lot of interesting things that you can do with collections. Some additional things that you can do, again, using the article designer, is I'm sure that everyone's aware of our ability to add related content to a particular article. So this includes basically box info and things like info boxes or pull quotes. And just remember that using article designer, those types of related content items, number one, can be pulled in line. So that's a great way to add little points of interest and, again, compelling visual elements throughout the story. And then number two, once you place them in line, they have inline presentation mode, so you can make them centered or half width or float left. This is great with pull quotes. This is an example of a pull quote over here on the right, where, and you can see this is a great mobile display. If you want to make this, half width and float left, you'll have a really nice pull quote, magazine style kind of pull quote that can be used as a compelling visual element, again, to keep people engaged as they go down the story.
All right. One of the other big things that you can do with a standard HTML asset that can be embedded in line in articles with the article designer is look on the web for other ways to create interactive elements. There are tons of tools available that allow you to do Google Maps, Google Street Views, timelines, interactive charts. So there's a ton of services that are available either for free. I know with the Google News Initiative, there's some tools available with, can't remember the name of it.
Oh, Flourish?
Flourish, that's the
Flourish,
thing.
I think, yeah.
So Flourish is a tool that's available for newsrooms. You have to sign up with it, but with the Google News Initiative, a lot of newspapers can get free access to that. And you can do some great interactive charts and data exploration with those kind of tools, and then they give you an embed code. You basically just drop that in as an HTML element, child asset for your article, and you can create some really compelling items that can help make exploring deep topics really interesting.
And I think too, one important thing to point out when you're doing those types of interactive elements, like Joe mentioned, using an HTML asset that is a child of your article is a better way to do these types of interactive elements than just pasting the HTML inside the article. For one thing, if you have accelerated mobile pages or AMP pages, having an inline HTML asset works on the AMP side, whereas just pasting in HTML into the article will probably make that specific article not validated for AMP. And it helps with mobile display. In addition, again, you have inline presentation mode for HTML assets. So you can actually pull an HTML asset in line You can tell it to display like a full HTML asset, like Joe was saying in this example here, or you can make it just a link, or you could make it just a card. So you have a lot of different options there for how you want those things to be displayed. So I mentioned a little bit already about our cover art feature, which is something that we've gotten a lot of really great feedback on and is a great tool to use when you're creating articles. This over here is kind of an example of what the cover art, these two are both cover art items. And especially on mobile, this looks great because you just have your nice background photo and then you can put your headline elements on top of it. There's actually, if you watch closely, there's some really subtle CSS transitions and animations that are part of that loading of that article, so it looks very kind of compelling. I will say that essentially the way that these work is that the photo itself that's used for the cover art will be sized to the height of the page. So you kind of have, it is a little bit tricky in terms of the type of photo that you can use that will work really well on mobile and on desktop. It might be very, very vertical, like in this example, or it might be very horizontal on a desktop site. So most of the time, what works best is kind of having a photo with a compelling center image that just has a lot of space on the edges so that you have room to make that cropping, or something that's a little bit more, vague or kind of an example type thing that you can have that's not necessarily more of like a graphic that can be used there.
Yeah, and I'll comment on that as well. You want to make sure that you preview. Don't be
Sure.
afraid of the preview option when you're building these pages out. You don't have to have them published yet, but you can preview them and really, play around and test and see how it's going to look on both a desktop and mobile devices. And that way you can make sure that it's going to present how you want it to present.
Especially mobile, because remember that probably 60 to 70% of your audience is actually looking at mobile on any given day. And if you haven't previewed your article in a mobile interface, then you don't know what a majority of your readers are actually looking at when they're looking at that article. In addition, there's a couple of other types of elements that we have for headlines that are really great options. When you're inside the Blocks admin, there's different tabs across the top on an article, and in the other tab, it actually has some additional headline types that are available for use there. For example, and I don't know if you can see this in the presentation, but at the very top here, we have a kicker, which is kind of just a little intro line that is above the article itself. A lot of times this might be a kind of a teaser lead into the article, or it might be a topic like education or something like that this particular article is about. Then we have a hammer headline, and as you can see, this is like a really big, it's actually, we use some kind of JavaScript that will actually size it dynamically to the size of the page. So it has a minimum and a maximum size that it goes to, but it will try to fit it into the area that it's allowed. And again, you get some really great experiences there. We actually have the ability now in several of our blocks that are used on section pages and front pages. You have the ability to show hammer headlines and kickers and subheads on those blocks as well. So if you're doing these types of compelling articles for maybe a top story for that day, you can actually make sure that your top story block on the front page is set up to also show the hammer headline, and that way you get, again, a really big compelling headline on your front page as well. And then in addition, we have a subhead here, so you can see the headline and then the subhead that's available. In this particular case, I've turned on a feature that we call time to consume, and this is something that basically does an algorithm to look at the number of paragraphs you have in the story, the number of photos, the number of graphic elements, and then it determines with the average reading time of the average consumer, how long this particular content will take for them to consume it. There have been some studies that show if a reader is told up front the amount of time that they need to invest in a particular piece of content before they click on it, they're more likely to click on it. So if it says this is a 30-minute read or this is a 1-minute read, they're more likely to click on that if they understand the type of investment they're making with that click. So that's something that is again available on a per site basis as a custom property that you can turn on, or it's in some of the individual blocks themselves that you can turn that on. But it's a really interesting feature that is great to help with engagement. So a couple other considerations to think about as you are thinking about your articles and building things out. The first thing is other kinds of platforms that your content might end up going to. A lot of you now have setups going to accelerated mobile pages. You have your content going to Facebook, you have your content going to Apple News. They're going out to all these different places, and just make sure that your content and your headlines and the photos and all those things are working on all those different platforms, and that you're getting the best version of your article out into those different platforms so that you're getting that traffic back to your site. And then Doug is going to talk just for a second about the different types of notification and social push we have now with Notifier.
Yeah, we put out Notifier. How long has Notifier been out? About a year now?
I think
roughly?
it's been a year.
Somewhere around there.
It doesn't seem that long.
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. But this is a really great way to engage with your community, and you can set it up so that when an article or an asset goes live, these will automatically get pushed out. And you can send it out to multiple platforms all at the same time, so it's a one-stop shop, no muss, no fuss kind of thing. You can send it out to all of your social medias if you're using our SMS notifications, web push notifications, app push notifications, all of those things. If you have a breaking news story of a major story that's happening in your community, you can push those out and get that out to your community quickly, rather than having to sit there and copy and paste links into all of your social media networks. You can basically set them up once in your Notifier, and then on the individual assets, just simply click on which channels you would like them to go to, and they push out automatically, and you can get them on your device there.
Yeah, I will say that, like you said, it's been about a year that we put that out. Really, it's a free product that you can use that's just part of the Blocks CMS system, and it has had really great response from our customers, and we've seen a lot of people set that up and start getting additional readers into their site because they're pushing out all of those different notifications. So if you don't know what we're talking about with Notifier and this new free application that's available, definitely talk to either your sales rep or a customer support person that can help you get this set up. And like Doug already mentioned, we actually have automatic triggers that you can set up. So if something's in the news section and it's flagged breaking news, it will automatically send an email alert on that. And you can really help streamline your newsroom workflow by setting up some of those automatic triggers. And if you have another example would be a sports columnist who has their own Facebook page, and every time that person posts a new article, you want it to post to his Facebook page. You can set that up in Notifier and have that all handled automatically. So there's some really great features that can be done there. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention a little bit, and this is again just something to think about as you're building these things, is think about the experience of, quote unquote, above the fold. You want to have that very first screen load very quickly, and you want to have that, the first photo and the headlines and all those things be kind of sub 1 or 2 seconds. And this is something that we really focus on in our development, is trying to lower that time to interact, which is basically when the reader first gets this first screen and they're able to start scrolling down on the page. That needs to be less than 1 or 2 seconds. And you also want to kind of try to think about when they do see that first screen load, you want to have a really compelling above the fold, again, experience. You want to have, again, and this is a good example where there's a nice headline, there's a compelling photo, you might have some additional info boxes or things like that in the top of the article here. Again, you're trying to get them to scroll down and start getting involved into the article. And then remember other things like having different kinds of, we have a couple of different related content items such as story highlights or updates and corrections and some different types of content that can be used again to help create kind of visual context throughout the page. A lot of times we see that people are scanning the articles as they're scrolling down that page, especially on mobile. So anytime you can have a subhead, a bullet list, an info box, a pull quote, a photo, a gallery, anything as you're scrolling down that page, you're going to draw them in and catch their eye as they're scrolling down the page. So a lot of great things that can be done there. That's it.
Great. All right. Time
Yeah.
for questions. And as a reminder, go ahead and put your type your questions in, and we can answer them. Is there a way to see a report that shows what a user clicked on that motivated them to subscribe to a digital membership on a hard paywall?
You wanna answer that?
I'll comment, not currently, but it is something we're actively working on. We're actually working on a project right now with the Google News Initiative to kind of do that. So that is something that will be coming soon, along with a big product announcement.
And I mean, in regards to that also, do you want to talk just for like 20 seconds-ish, Tim, about like one of my favorite spiels that Tim gives is kind of talking about content funnels. So we have the IQ Engage program that Tim is responsible for. And one of the really interesting things that he talks about as part of that, the setup process and the purpose behind that product is looking at the content funnel for people reading the site and having independent strategies for each of the types of users to get them to the next stage can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, sure.
We don't I don't
I was like, well,
You-
I'm
you
trying
have-
to think how to tie it back to the,
you have an awesome
Good
graphic
question.
of it, but
yeah.
just in terms of kind of the strategies of getting somebody to convert to a subscriber and all those types of things, there's like a really, there's some great strategies there.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, when we start to look at converting subscribers, we start to segment them off into different buckets because we know our opportunity is different for different people, and then the reason why people subscribe is different. Some people are volume consumers, and they're just going to subscribe because they've hit the limit of articles they could read. Some people are interested in a specific topic, so you'd want to restrict access to that type of content. Some users are loyal to your brand and your mission, and so they're going to just do that out of that. So, in general, when we're talking like until, we have more data to show you or give you access to, proprietary content is always going to convert better. Anything that you guys, that newsroom is covering exclusively, that you own, that's always going to convert better than that. Long form content is much better at converting than shorter content. And when we talk about, and one of the reasons why this data, isn't readily available is because we want to look at everything that user read up until the point of conversion to understand that user, especially like when we're talking about something like a metered conversion. Just because it's the last thing they clicked on doesn't mean it's the thing that made them make that purchase decision. The wall made them make the purchase decision, not the article. But if we look historically at everything that user read up into the wall, we have a better idea of what he or she was interested in and the type of content that will keep them coming back. Somebody who does a great job with this is omaha.com, right? They just have a really good sense of what their audience is interested in and what gets them to convert. And they invest a lot of time in that content. So in their Subscriber Plus program, they have certain content that is restricted to subscribers. And I'd say about 70% of their subscribers interact with a piece of Subscriber Plus premium content in a given month. And so, really they have a pretty good sense of, what their audience is interested in. So, that's a long way of saying, really focusing on the things that you can do best, that your newsroom does well. That's usually going to be the thing that converts the most users.
Yeah, we had some conversation on the community site recently, which is community.townnews.com.
Think so.
Got it correct? So yeah, everyone check that out. But there's a really great kind of conversation there about doing kind of a plus membership platform. So if they sign up for, a digital account, they get into the plus sponsors or membership, and like what Omaha did, they actually showed less ads in that scenario, and they're a really good example of that use case for a number of reasons. Like Tim said, in terms of how their content strategy as well as their membership strategy too.
Right, because we know different value props are going to get different users to convert. We always recommend that you have a multifaceted strategy for conversions. And so, like with Subscriber Plus, obviously there's metered content, then there's content that's behind a hard paywall, so those are two different targets. They also do ad light, which is another way of saying, you get hitting another group of users who might not like advertising. I think when they first launched too, there's also like discounts for certain advertising or other classifieds maybe, or some other stuff like that. So it's like really looking at all the things that users value and then just, offering that as part of what you're doing.
And just one more quick thing about the IQ Engage platform. And again, if you're not aware of this platform, it basically allows you to kind of categorize your users based on their behaviors and then offer up different experiences to those users to help them meet your goals, essentially. So if you see that someone's coming in from social, you can say, this is probably not a loyal user, they're not a subscriber, they're going to be a one and done type user. So what is my strategy for those types of users? It might be to get them to sign up for an email list, okay? So with IQ Engage, you target those specific users and do an overlay email sign up pop up just for those users. And then your loyal users might be another category that you have. And the loyal users, you have a different conversion strategy. Loyal users, you might want to have, more behavioral content recommendations or additional content because they're more likely to click on those other types of news. So there's a lot, or maybe have a better kind of subscription offer that you might want to try to get them into the subscription world. So it's a really interesting program, and is definitely something that we've seen really good success out of that platform, and it's very interesting.
All right, next question. Where do you find time to consume in Block CMS so you can turn it on?
Yeah, it's a page customization property that is available. If you go to your block editor and then you go to any individual page or just the front page in the block editor, in the right-hand side, there's, I believe it just says time to consume in terms of the properties on the right-hand side. So you can choose to kind of show that, or in individual blocks, it depends on the block obviously, but in like our summary block and our grid block, it'll have under, I think, the content section, it'll say time to consume, show or hide. And then this will allow you to just show the little time to consume mark in individual articles or in the blocks on the front page. And obviously, you can show them in the article itself, but in order to get them to click onto the article, then that would be shown in a block, if that makes sense. And feel free to contact our customer support team if I didn't say the right thing.
Yeah, but it's in that first general block on page customization. You can choose to do it between long form or all articles.
Right. Yeah, and that was something that we built in there, was the ability. That was something that, as we were building out that feature, I thought, it might not be something that you want to put on. It's like 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, because you have all these really short AP articles or something. So there is the option to just turn it on for long form articles. And then that way, for the short AP articles, it doesn't say the time to consume, but on their long form articles, the ones that are going to be a longer time frame, it will show that way. So that's another thing to look at. Thank you, Joe.
Where are the behavioral content recommendations located in the CMS?
The behavioral content recommendations are part of our IQ Engage platform. And that's something, it's a special block that can be set up in a couple of different ways. That as part of the onboarding process for that program, we will add that. Do you want to say anything about that, Tim? I'm going to take in so we'll add that to the page on there. But again, that's kind of like one of our default setups when you sign up for IQ Engage, is that It will start tracking the user signals of the users on your pages. So what are they doing, the types of content that they're reading, if they're reading a lot of sports articles, if they're reading a lot of news articles, how often are they coming back? Anything that we can learn about them based on their behaviors, we'll kind of categorize them. And then that behavioral content recommendation block will allow us to show either contextual recommendations, which means we essentially scan the page and then look up additional content that is similar to that content. Or if we know more information about that user, we'll show them more. So even though they're on an article about Trump, we're going to show them some sports articles for their favorite baseball team so that they can re-engage as they're finishing that first article and then go to another article that they're really interested in. So it's a really great program. If you haven't heard about that yet, then please contact your sales rep and they can get you started on that.
All right. Is Article Designer and some of these features only available on the CMS side or also on Total CMS?
So it is available on Total CMS. And you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so they are available on Total CMS. You can do all your article design stuff there as well. The only thing I'll mention is kind of it's something we're actually working on a little bit, are the not the related content, but the sub content types, like the correction note or those kind of blocks. They don't write back, so if you make changes to those on the page, those things won't write back currently to the site. But we are working. That's a thing we're working on fixing. But yes, all those article design features are available on the newer versions of Total CMS that they're using to update.
Yeah, so if you can't find it, update your Total CMS.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Where do we find the options for hammer headlines and kickers?
So in the article itself, if you go to the other tab and then kind of scroll down a little bit, then there's the kicker, hammer, and subhead, I believe, are all available there.
When a vertical gallery is attached inline at the end of the story, are there any plans to add the headline and description to display, similar to how it does when a slideshow collection is attached? This could help readers realize when a related gallery is attached instead of just scrolling and eventually realizing they've entered a collection.
That sounds like a good idea. I'm not sure that I tracked exactly all of the edge cases that were talked about there, but yeah, I mean, I will say that there are a lot of different kind of competing feature requests in regards to how certain inline assets are displayed. So just one example would be a video. We've had requests to not show a headline alongside a video because you want it to be part of the kind of the article experience more. But then at the same time, sometimes you really need the headline to tell you what the video is about. So that's something that we might address in the future with having maybe part of the inline presentation mode that you could choose kind of the headline display as part of that. So that might be kind of an answer to your question. That is something that we're kind of working on as part of that.
Along the same lines, are there any plans for visual storytelling outside of what we've talked about today?
Yes.
Any we can talk about?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm exploring right now are AMP stories, which are very short form stories that are very visually engaging. They basically would have, just a few words and a headline per page with some sort of video or image background on them, and they'd be very engaged. And there'll be something there'll be AMP stories, but also there'll be a desktop version of them as well. And these are just very visually engaging kind of article stories told over a number of slides.
And I mean, in some respects, so we see this, it's kind of like short form journalism, or what do you call it, Tim? Snackable? Is that the...
I don't call it snackable. I would call it short form, but yes.
He doesn't want that.
But kind of the idea behind it is that, you're just waiting in line and you're just kind of, clicking on different little things, and you're not going to read a whole complex article about something, but you're just scrolling through a couple things and looking at things. So it's that kind of very short form. Unfortunately, it works really well with a lot of users these days, is these kind of shallow.
Well, I think we just, as a as an industry have to, redefine what we consider to be content, right? I think a lot of it is, for us, a package piece of text and photos is what we consider content, and maybe videos now. But really, if you have reporters on the field, sometimes an image is enough, or sometimes 3 or 4 images with a voiceover is enough, right? I mean, we just have to consider, what is content, what is important to our readers, what's the most efficient way to communicate to the audience, and if it's simply a photo, then simply a photo, or like a Snapchat story or something like that.
Right.
And people are we also have to take advantage of the tools that we have or the way that our audience is consuming it. And with mobile phones, there's certain stories that we can do better, or it's better to communicate through maybe a method that they're more familiar with, like a tap through story or other things like that.
And and I was kind of making a bad sort of joke about the audience, but it's kind of true that they've lost a lot of attention span, as we've seen with, a lot of stuff's going on. That being said, just to jump on something that Tim was saying, kind of this idea of what's the best way to tell this story, right? So like, if you've got it's a parade, and you might, a long form that has 60 paragraphs about every vendor and 25 interviews, type of thing, might not be the best way to tell that story. It might be just a ton of pictures of kids. And people just would love looking at all the different kids and all the people at the thing, and they're eating the candy and all that stuff. That might be a really great way to tell that particular story. So for any individual type of thing, what's the best way to tell this story? So to get back to the question, that is a great, we are working on some of those kind of short form type articles, and we have some things coming out that along those lines. If you have any specific ideas,
they did. They
Okay.
gave us 2 article ideas they want us to go look at. So I'll share this with you guys later, and you can go and pick those apart.
Awesome.
Next question. I like the look of the cover art design options for articles, but is there a way to have caption information appear with that image?
That is a good question. I think we can definitely look at that. It was kind of in the beginning, it was meant to be more of like a background image, or almost like like needles on on the back in the background.
More
art.
It's more
Exactly.
art than image.
Yeah.
That's what it's
And so in those kind of situations, having a caption show up there is doesn't make as much sense. However, I have seen a lot of really good use cases where it's a picture of 3 kids standing there, and you want to name the kids and whatnot. So,
and a good case on that as well is you don't have to use the art just on the cover. That same piece of art could be as a child asset.
That's a good point, actually.
Of the article, which would then have its full caption information. So, and it just be reused and redisplayed in a different format.
And actually, that's a great answer I do think that we should look at some way to offer a toggle or something that can let you choose, but that's a really great answer for right now, is to use the picture of the kids as the cover art, and then maybe a couple of screens down, because you don't want it right away at the top, but a couple of screens down, put that same image in line, and then it will get a caption as an inline.
So you would create the child asset first, and then when you go to do your cover art, you can copy from that asset.
Exactly.
So you don't have to do a ton of work.
Yeah,
Correct,
yeah, that's a really good idea.
All right, I think
I
that's
know
all
I
the
invited you for some
questions.
reason.
Because he's an expert.
An expert.
Okay, that looks like all of our questions. So there are many ways to stay connected. You can find a lot of these tips and tricks at our documentation site, help.blockcms.com. You can call our support line at 800-293-9576 or visit support.townnews.com to fill out a ticket and get more information. The partner community, as Christine mentioned, is community.townnews.com, and it's a great resource for asking questions, finding out what other people are doing, sharing what's worked for you. A lot of great resources there too. You can find out the service of our. I follow this one every month. The status of our servers at townnews.status.io. It's important for you guys to know that information is out there. Or you can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. You can stay connected by signing up for one of our many newsletters on our website. If you sign up for today's webinar, you're added to the webinar announcements email, and you'll be notified of when the recording is available. and receive invitations to upcoming webinars. And if you have any ideas for webinars, feel free to let us know and we will entertain them. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the panel. Did anyone have any last words that are appropriate for
Thank you.
sharing?
We always like it as well if you share your great story
Oh, yeah.
presentations. If you've got something you've really been really proud of, share it on the community channel, and they're great ways to show off.
Yeah, we would love to show those off too.
And thank you guys for coming to the meeting today. So I think it was a good kind of additional voices to be heard in discussion. So I think it's good.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.